The silence before the storm. It started on a gray Thursday morning in Los Angeles. The sky was overcast, as if it, too, was uncertain of what the day might bring. Keanu Reeves sat quietly in a modest corner of his hotel suite, dressed in simple clothes, sipping tea without a trace of pretense. Despite his fame, despite decades of success in film, he still moved like a man who had something to prove. Not to the world, but to himself. There was something deeply human about the way he carried himself. And that morning, without knowing it, he was about to step into one of the most watched and debated broadcasts in modern television history. The invitation came unexpectedly, routed through his assistant from a major international news network. It was a live panel discussion, an open conversation on ethics, technology, and the future of humanity. The panel included politicians, scientists, philosophers, and at the very center of it, Elon Musk. The host had insisted Keanu be there, not because he was an expert in AI or rocket science, but because people listened to him. Not the fans, not the followers. People. Everyday people. They trusted him, not for the roles he played, but for the dignity he showed in real life. Keanu didn't like confrontation. He avoided it, in fact. But something in him stirred when he saw the topic for discussion: humanity in the hands of power. He stared at those words for a long while. He thought of the people he had met, the suffering he had seen, the kindness he had received from strangers. He thought of all the people who had no voice. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "Maybe it's time." The stage was sleek, modern, illuminated by soft white lighting. The world was watching. Millions of people tuned in from every continent. The cameras rolled as the host introduced each guest with practiced ease. Elon Musk was seated confidently at the center, dressed sharply, his posture that of a man who knew he dominated every room he entered. He spoke first, articulating grand visions of a future shaped by neural implants, Mars colonies, and human-machine integration. His tone was not arrogant, but it carried the cold efficiency of someone who saw the world as a series of puzzles to solve, not lives to touch. For 20 minutes, Keanu listened in silence. His hands rested gently on his lap. His eyes didn't blink often, but when they did, they seemed to hold questions no one dared to ask. Every so often, the camera would pan to him, waiting for a reaction, hoping for something viral. But he gave them nothing. Just a calm stillness that contrasted so deeply with the charged energy in the room. Then the host turned to him. "Mr. Reeves," she said carefully, "you've been very quiet. What do you think of Mr. Musk's vision? Is this the future we should embrace?" The room fell silent. Elon leaned back slightly, confident and unbothered. He didn't expect to be challenged by an actor, but he underestimated the weight of lived experience. Keanu leaned forward just a little, not dramatically, just enough to let the world know he was about to speak. "I think," he began slowly, "that the future isn't built with machines or money. It's built with heart. And lately, I'm not sure we've been listening to it." The host looked intrigued. Elon smirked politely. Keanu continued, his voice steady, not confrontational, but resolute. "Technology is powerful, yes. It can save lives. It can connect people, but it can also erase them. Not physically, but emotionally, spiritually. When we start thinking of humans as systems to upgrade, as minds to hack, we forget something important. We forget that pain, grief, joy, these aren't glitches in our code. They're what make us human." The room went very quiet. Elon responded with a calculated smile. "With respect, Keanu, emotions are the very things that make us inefficient, unpredictable, irrational. If we want to survive in a future run by logic and data, we need to evolve past that." Keanu's eyes didn't move from him. "And what happens to the people who can't afford to evolve?" he asked. "What happens to the child born into poverty who never gets the neural implant? What happens to the mother in a village with no electricity, watching her baby die of something curable? Do they become obsolete in your world?" You could feel the tension rising. Not the kind that comes from anger, but the kind that comes from truth. Raw, uncomfortable, undeniable truth. Elon straightened his jacket, clearly surprised. "We're talking about scaling solutions globally," he said. "Of course, there will be challenges, but—" Keanu cut in gently. Not loudly. Not aggressively. Just enough to interrupt the script. "Your solution," he said, "starts at the top. Mine starts at the bottom. Your future saves the privileged. Mine listens to the forgotten." And then it happened. Someone in the audience stood. It was a woman in her mid-40s. She didn't look rich or famous. Her clothes were plain. Her hands shook as she raised them. The host motioned to security, but Keanu held up his hand, silently asking them to let her speak. "My daughter died 2 years ago," the woman said. "We couldn't afford the treatment. I wrote letters. To governments, to billionaires. I begged. I got no reply. And yet, here's this man," she pointed to Keanu, "who came to our hospital once without cameras, without a press team. He sat with my daughter for an hour, and she smiled, really smiled, for the first time in weeks. That was more than any machine could do." The entire auditorium was still. Even Elon had no words. Keanu didn't cry. He just bowed his head, and then, very softly, he said, "I didn't save her. She saved me." The cameras cut to commercials after that. Producers scrambled, unsure whether to lean into the moment or run from it. But the internet didn't wait. Within minutes, clips flooded social media. Millions shared the exchange. Debates erupted. Opinion pieces were drafted. And quietly, beneath the noise, something began to shift. But for Keanu, it wasn't about winning. It was about remembering. Remembering why he still showed up, still spoke when it hurt, still listened when others wouldn't. Because somewhere out there, someone needed to know that humanity still mattered more than algorithms. That night, after the lights had dimmed and the studio emptied, Keanu sat alone on a bench outside the building. The wind was cool. The city buzzed in the distance, and his phone lit up with a message he hadn't expected, one that would pull him even deeper into something he never saw coming. A message from Elon Musk. It simply read, "You're not wrong. Meet me tomorrow, off camera." And that's where everything changed. Behind closed doors, the next morning arrived with a quiet chill that hung in the air like a question waiting to be answered. Keanu Reeves stood by the window of his modest hotel room, watching the city wake up, one honk, one footstep, one breath at a time. He held his phone in one hand, the message from Elon Musk still glowing softly on the screen, its words replaying in his mind. "You're not wrong. Meet me tomorrow, off camera." There were no details, no location, no time. Just those few words, stripped of any arrogance, stripped of performance. It felt less like a challenge and more like an invitation. An invitation not to debate but to understand. And that was what pulled Keanu in. Not curiosity, not pride, but a desire to go deeper, not into tech, but into the human soul behind one of the most powerful minds on earth. By mid-afternoon, the call came. A voice, clear, professional, with the kind of calm that comes from someone used to secrecy, gave him an address. It wasn't a corporate office or a studio. It was an old observatory on the outskirts of the city, long abandoned, perched atop a dusty hill overlooking the quiet edges of civilization. Keanu didn't ask why. He just got into his car, drove without music, and let his thoughts fill the silence. Memories came, like old friends visiting without knocking. He thought about his childhood, about the many times he felt invisible, about the teachers who called him slow, about the auditions he failed, and the friends he lost one after another to things money couldn't stop. Cancer, accidents, heartbreak. And now, here he was, heading to meet one of the richest, most influential people in the world. Not to ask for anything, not to offer judgment, but maybe, just maybe, to find a bridge between two different visions of the future. The observatory stood like a sleeping monument, wrapped in vines and surrounded by wind-blown silence. Its dome was rusted, its windows fogged with years of disuse. Yet as Keanu stepped inside, he found it strangely beautiful, peaceful even. And there, in the middle of the room, beneath the cracked glass ceiling that still framed the sky, stood Elon Musk. Alone. No security. No assistance. Just him. Staring. Up through the broken dome at the sky. Keanu walked up slowly. There was no need for introductions. They were two men who already knew each other in a way most people never could. Not through words, but through wounds. Elon spoke first, his voice quieter than Keanu had ever heard it. This place used to belong to my grandfather. He believed in stars more than people, thought the universe was where salvation would come from. He paused, then turned. I think I've started to believe the same thing. Keanu looked around. And now? Elon sighed. Now? I don't know. After yesterday, I keep hearing your words, not just in my mind, in my chest. It's strange. I've built rockets, created electric cars, changed the way the world thinks about energy and transportation. But last night I couldn't sleep, not because of criticism, but because for the first time in a long time, I wondered if maybe I forgot something along the way. Keanu didn't reply immediately. He simply sat down on the dusty floor, crossing his legs like a monk in meditation. After a few seconds, Elon joined him, without suit, without armor. Just a man. Two men now sat in the center of an ancient building, once meant for reaching the stars, talking not about the future of Mars, but about the future of the human heart. You didn't forget, Keanu said gently. You just learned to survive in a system that rewards vision, not compassion. You kept running, faster and faster, and sometimes when we run too fast, we forget what we're running toward. Elon looked at him, eyes not defensive but weary. And what if we've already run too far? Keanu smiled slightly. Then we stop, we turn around, we look back, and we find the people we left behind. A silence followed. Not empty, but full of understanding, full of questions, full of something neither of them could name. After a long pause, Elon reached into his jacket and pulled out a small tablet. He slid it across the dusty floor toward Keanu. There's something I've been building, he said. Not a product, not for sale, just an idea. A program that tracks suffering, real human pain, medical emergencies, water shortages, displaced families. It gathers data from hospitals, shelters, refugee camps, and prioritizes them. Keanu stared at the screen. There were maps, flashing red dots, numbers that weren't just statistics, they were lives. Children, mothers, entire communities invisible to the media but screaming for help through signals only machines could hear. This is incredible, Keanu whispered. Why haven't you released it? Elon hesitated. Because no one cares about things that don't make money. Investors told me it was a waste, that it wouldn't scale, that it didn't fit the brand. Keanu looked up, eyes steady. Then, maybe it's time we build a new brand. Elon chuckled softly. You make it sound so simple. It is, Keanu said. Not easy, but simple. They sat there not as celebrity and mogul, but as two men stripped of their titles talking like brothers. And in that quiet, something powerful began to take shape. Not a product, not a pitch, but a pact. We bring this to the world, Keanu said, together. We show them that compassion can be scalable, that kindness can be engineered, that humanity isn't a weakness, it's our greatest strength. Elon looked at him with something close to disbelief. Not because he doubted the words, but because he hadn't heard anyone say them with such clarity in years, maybe decades. And then, just as he was about to respond, a loud crack shattered the moment, the sound of splintering wood. They turned. The old door to the observatory creaked open and a figure stepped inside. A woman. Tall, wearing a dark coat, eyes sharp. Not press, not paparazzi. Something colder. Mr. Musk, she said crisply. You weren't supposed to be here. Elon stood up slowly. I canceled all my meetings today. She didn't blink. This isn't about your schedule, it's about optics. We've received word. Someone leaked footage from the studio last night. The stock is already down 7%. Keanu watched. Silently, the woman glanced at him. And your guest, he's part of the problem. Elon looked at her, and for the first time in years he didn't back down. No, he said calmly. He's part of the solution. The woman's jaw tightened. We advise against any further public collaboration. It's already affecting the board. Keanu rose to his feet, voice steady. Then maybe your board needs to be reminded what it means to be human. The woman turned sharply and left without another word. Elon stood still, conflicted. Behind him was a world of power, profit, influence. In front of him was a path that led somewhere uncertain, somewhere real. He turned to Keanu. If we do this, we'll lose things. Reputation, allies, maybe more. Keanu stepped forward. But we might save lives. Elon nodded once. Slow. Final. Then let's start, he said. And as they walked out of the observatory, a storm began to gather in the distance. Not of weather, but of change. Because now the world would see what happened when a billionaire and a broken-hearted actor joined forces for something far greater than fame. The spark beneath the empire, 3 days passed. Not a single press conference. Not a single public statement. Yet behind the closed doors of a repurposed industrial building hidden on the edge of Silicon Valley, something began to stir. The building, once an abandoned textile warehouse, now echoed with quiet footsteps, the faint hum of servers, and the murmurs of people who believed they were building something more than a project. They were building a movement. Keanu Reeves and Elon Musk had taken no oath, signed no formal agreement, and yet both knew this was the most important thing they had ever committed to. Together, they called it Pulse. It was more than a name. It was a promise. A living system powered not by money but by empathy, a global signal designed to locate real human suffering, not to observe it but to act. Elon had unlocked dormant satellite tech, hidden deep within his private archives, systems that were, once intended for private enterprise surveillance, now reprogrammed to track forgotten corners of the world, refugee camps in Sudan, abandoned clinics in Peru, flood zones in Bangladesh, a school in rural Syria where children still gathered even when bombs fell just miles away. Meanwhile, Keanu brought something that couldn't be coded. People, storytellers, volunteers, doctors, social workers. He sent letters, voice notes, and handwritten invites to hundreds of people he had met during years of quiet charity work. People who had no wealth, no spotlight, but who had spent their lives helping others, in silence. And slowly those people began to arrive at the warehouse. Not because of Elon's fame, but because Keanu asked. The first real challenge came unexpectedly. It started with a leak. A single photo, blurry and out of context, appeared on a tech blog. Keanu and Elon, both seated in the warehouse beside glowing screens, surrounded by maps and humanitarian data. The caption was mocking. What's Neo doing in Elon's playground? Within hours, social media lit up. Theories flooded timelines. The press demanded answers. Investors panicked. And then came the calls. Endless calls from board members, lobbyists, and government advisors. They weren't curious. They were angry. Because what Keanu and Elon were building wasn't just a side project. It was a mirror. A mirror that reflected what society had ignored for too long. And powerful people don't like mirrors. Inside the warehouse, the team worked tirelessly. They were building a live dashboard, one that could pull real-time distress signals from hospitals, clinics, shelters, and emergency broadcasts. And they didn't just want to show the pain. They wanted to redirect resources. Water trucks, emergency teams, food shipments, and above all, attention. Not clickbait attention, not viral sadness, but sustained help. Action rooted in presence. And that was exactly why the opposition began to rise. One evening, as the team prepared for a live beta test in Uganda, a rural hospital with failing electricity and a critical medicine shortage, Keanu received a visitor. She was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit, hair pulled back tight. Her badge didn't say government, but her presence screamed authority. She introduced herself only as Emily, and her tone was clinical. She didn't ask. She told, "You're operating on restricted bandwidth. Your satellite relays are interfering with defense protocols. We're going to need you to shut the network down until further review." Keanu looked at her without blinking. "We're coordinating emergency medicine to over 200 children. If we shut down now, they might not make it through the weekend." Emily didn't flinch. "There are larger interests at stake." Elon appeared then, stepping into the room from behind the glass. His voice was ice cold. "What larger interest is more important than saving lives?" Emily turned. "National stability, economic balance. You've both crossed into territory that doesn't belong to you." Keanu took a step forward, not in anger, but in quiet defiance. "This isn't territory. This is humanity." Emily studied him. "You think your good intentions give you permission to destabilize decades of planning? You think people in power will let this grow?" Keanu didn't back down. "They don't have to let it. We'll build it anyway." And just like that, Emily left. No threat, no promise, just a quiet exit that felt more ominous than any shouting could have. That night, as the beta test began, tension filled every corner of the warehouse. Satellite images updated in real time. Trucks moved through mud-soaked roads. Volunteers responded via radio. And in the tiny hospital in Uganda, the power flickered, but stayed on. Within 6 hours, the right medicine reached the hands of a tired nurse who had worked 3 straight days. Her voice came through the feed, shaking, broken by emotion. "We thought no one knew. No one cared. But someone did. Thank you. Thank you." The room erupted in quiet cheers, not loud, but full of something holy, purpose. And just as Elon turned to speak, the power in the warehouse cut off. Everything went black. Every screen, every light, even backup systems failed. And then a message appeared on the main screen. White text against a black void. "Stop now or this ends here." The room stood frozen. Someone had gotten in, not through the doors, through the system. Someone powerful. Someone scared. Elon stared at the screen, face unreadable. "They're serious," he said softly. "We're not playing with ideas anymore. We're threatening their control." Keanu looked around at the team, people who had given up jobs, homes, safety to be there, and he realized something deeper than fear. They were being watched, not because they were dangerous, but because they were effective. "Then we don't stop," Keanu said. "We go bigger." Elon turned slowly. "We go public?" Keanu nodded. "Not just a launch, a revelation. We show the world everything." Elon took a breath. "If we do this, they'll come for us." Keanu stepped into the center of the room. "They're already here." In the distance, far beyond the city skyline, multiple radio towers began to blink erratically. And at that very moment, somewhere in Washington, somewhere in Tokyo, somewhere in Brussels, private networks activated. Because now, pulse wasn't just a signal. It was a spark, and sparks, if not extinguished, become fire. The betrayal. Inside the light, the morning after the power outage, the warehouse was tense. The servers came back online slowly, flickering back to life like survivors after a storm. But something had changed, something invisible, yet thick in the air. The volunteers moved quieter. The analysts stared longer at their screens, and Keanu Reeves stood by the wall of monitors, hands folded, eyes locked on a single feed. Live satellite footage of a small coastal village in Indonesia, where an earthquake had hit just hours earlier. The buildings had collapsed like paper. And the people were standing in the streets holding handwritten signs that simply read, "Pulse, help us." The team hadn't announced anything. They hadn't even broadcast that their system was live. But word had spread. Somehow people already knew. And they were reaching out. Keanu turned to Elon, who had just walked in, phone pressed to his ear. His face was pale, jaw tight. When he finally hung up, he didn't speak right away. He just stared at the floor like a man who had heard something too heavy to repeat. Keanu approached quietly. "Who was it?" Elon looked up. "The SEC, the DOJ, the White House. They're all watching. And now, my board is calling an emergency vote. They're trying to push me out." Keanu's breath caught in his chest. "They're serious then?" Elon nodded. "They're saying I'm endangering the company, breaching national data protocols. One of the directors even called Pulse a humanitarian virus, said it spreads hope too fast." For a long time, neither man spoke. The only sound was the quiet buzz of the servers and the slow beeping of the emergency relief tracker. A child in Nepal had been located. An elderly couple in Algeria was still trapped in rubble. Every beep was a heartbeat. Every red dot was a plea. Keanu sat down beside a young coder named Priya. She had joined Pulse after losing her brother to a preventable infection in a war zone. She hadn't spoken much since arriving, but now she turned to him, her voice trembling. "Sir, someone accessed our system last night, not from outside, from here." He blinked slowly. "You're sure?" "Yes," she said. "They rerouted part of the uplink through a private server. Someone's been copying our data." Someone inside. The betrayal hit like a punch to the chest. Keanu looked around the room, at the faces he had come to trust, to protect. They weren't strangers anymore. They were a family. A fragile, aching family trying to make something good in a world that had forgotten how. And someone among them had opened the door to those who wanted it destroyed. Elon ran a silent trace through the server logs. His fingers moved fast, almost angry. After 2 minutes, he froze. The screen flashed a name. One of the senior developers. His name was Marcus Delroy, mid-30s, clean-cut, smart. He had worked with Elon before, helped design the neural relay interface. He had come to Pulse saying he believed in the cause. And now it was clear. He had sold them out. Keanu stood and walked toward the back of the warehouse where Marcus worked. The man was sitting alone, tapping his fingers nervously on the table. When he saw Keanu, he didn't even flinch. In fact, he looked almost relieved. "I know," Marcus said quietly. "I knew you'd find me." Keanu didn't raise his voice. "Why?" Marcus's eyes were bloodshot. "You don't understand how deep this goes. Pulse isn't just a threat to companies or governments. It's a threat to systems. Systems that have been in place for decades. Entire industries profit off of slow aid, broken infrastructure, managed suffering. If Pulse works, if it proves people can help each other directly, a lot of people lose power." Keanu stared at him, heartbreaking. "And you chose them." Marcus looked down. "I chose to stay alive. They made it clear. Either I give them access, or disappear. I have a family." Elon stepped in then. "You think Keanu doesn't know what it means to lose people, to be threatened? We all do. But betrayal wasn't your only choice." Marcus stood, eyes filled with guilt. "You think this ends with a few servers and satellite maps? This is bigger than both of you." Keanu walked away, saying only one thing over his shoulder. "So is kindness." They cut Marcus's access that evening, not with anger, not with revenge, but with the calm resolve of people who refused to be broken. They didn't call the authorities, they didn't go public with the betrayal, because Pulse wasn't about spectacle, it was about service. But the cracks had begun to form. Overnight, news outlets flooded the internet with twisted stories. Elon's secret AI takeover. Keanu's tech cult. One article claimed Pulse was a cover for a global surveillance operation. Another said it was a scheme to overthrow governments through charity. And worst of all, someone leaked footage. From inside the warehouse, edited clips taken out of context made to look sinister. Keanu helping a sick woman via drone delivery. Elon speaking firmly to a senator during a call. Pieces of truth bent into weapons. Donations dried up. Corporate sponsors pulled back. Elon's companies lost billions in stock value overnight. Reporters swarmed the warehouse gates. And still amidst the chaos, the red dots on the Pulse screen continued to blink. Needs didn't stop just because the world looked away. Keanu sat alone that night on the rooftop, staring at the stars through the polluted sky. He remembered the woman from the live broadcast, her daughter, the nurse in Uganda, the handwritten signs. He remembered every face pulse had helped, not as statistics, as souls, and it broke him to think it might all vanish before it even began. Elon joined him silently, bringing 2 mugs of tea. "It's not fair," Keanu said quietly. "We gave everything. And still, it's not enough." Elon sipped his tea. No, when I was younger, I used to think that saving the world meant building something indestructible. A machine. A ship. Something that couldn't be torn down. But now I think maybe real change comes from building something fragile, something honest, and daring the world to destroy it. Keanu turned to him. "And if it does?" Elon smiled, softly. "Then we build it again." Just then, Priya rushed onto the rooftop, breathless. "You both need to see this," she said, holding up her tablet. On the screen was a video, a live feed. Not from Pulse, but from a remote village in Pakistan. A boy, no older than 10, stood before a dusty webcam, holding a sign that read, "We still believe in Pulse, don't stop." Within minutes, hundreds of similar videos began pouring in, from Haiti, from Myanmar, from Bolivia. Voices from places the world often forgot, saying one thing in unison: "Please don't stop." Keanu watched, stunned. And then, without warning, he stood. He turned to Elon, his voice suddenly filled with fire. "We go live." Elon blinked. "You mean?" "Everything," Keanu said. "No scripts, no edits. We tell the world the truth, the whole truth. Tonight." Elon stood beside him. "You're sure?" Keanu's eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. "They tried to bury us with lies. Now we'll answer with light." As the team scrambled to prepare a global live stream, the clock ticked toward midnight, and somewhere, in the dark corners of the world, the enemies of Pulse began to prepare their final move, because the truth was coming, and not everyone wanted the world to hear it. The live stream that shook the world midnight came like a whisper, soft and unnoticed by most, but inside the warehouse, inside the heart of Pulse, it arrived like a drumbeat before battle. Cables were laid, routers rebooted, backup generators, humming like the final breath before a leap into the unknown. Keanu Reeves sat in the center of the main operations room, a single camera pointed at his face. There was no makeup, no lighting team, no scripts, just one man and his truth. Elon Musk stood behind the camera, arms crossed, phone off, eyes fixed. The team had debated for hours whether this was the right move, whether they were exposing themselves too much, too fast, but in the end, it was Keanu who said what they all felt. "If the world wants to tear us apart, let them hear us first." The T. Red light blinked on. Live. No countdown. No flashy graphics. Just a direct stream, unfiltered and unannounced, sent through every platform that would allow it, broadcast via open-source links, shared by thousands within the first minute alone. And then Keanu began to speak, not with the voice of an actor, not with the polish of a performer, but with the weight of a man who had lived through pain and still chose hope. "I don't have the right words," he began, his voice slow, clear, trembling only slightly, "but I know what it feels like to be forgotten, to be hurting and feel like no one sees you. I've lost people I loved. I've watched dreams fall apart. I've stood at hospital beds where no help came. That's why Pulse exists. Not because we're perfect, but because we're trying." He paused, eyes locked on the lens, speaking, not to the screen but to the unseen hearts on the other side. "They're telling you this is dangerous, they're calling it a threat. But ask yourself, why is kindness a threat? Why is helping someone in need controversial? Why does the idea of direct compassion scare the powerful so much?" He leaned closer, no anger in his voice, only sincerity. "We are not against governments. We're not here to replace systems. We're here to remind them who they're supposed to serve. Remind them that behind every chart, every budget, Every border, there are people. People who cry, people who bleed, people who hope. By now, the live stream had crossed 4 million viewers. Then 8, then 12. It was spreading faster than any coordinated press release ever could. Celebrities reposted it. Activists translated it. Teachers played it in classrooms. And somewhere in the chaos of digital noise, something rare happened. People began to listen, not with distraction, but with full attention. Elon stepped into the frame beside Keanu, not as a billionaire or a tech mogul, but simply as a man ready to stand beside a cause greater than profit. "We didn't build Pulse to change the world overnight," he said. "We built it so no one feels alone. So a mother in a collapsed building doesn't have to wait 3 days for someone to notice. So a child without clean water doesn't have to wonder if their life matters. We built it for them." Then, one by one, the team members joined in. Priya stepped forward, holding a photo of her brother. An old nurse from Syria joined remotely. A teacher from Peru. A young man from Congo. They all told their stories, not as victims, but as proof that pain exists everywhere, and so does courage. But as the broadcast reached its peak, 21 million live viewers and climbing, the screen flickered. Once. Then again. Then the feed went black. Panic hit the room. Text scrambled, routers blinked. An alert appeared. External network interference. Coordinated. Aggressive. Someone was trying to shut them down in real time. Keanu looked to Elon. Elon nodded and opened the secondary stream. A satellite loop powered by an older, now decommissioned system that Pulse had quietly reactivated weeks before. It worked, but just barely. The image was grainy, audio unstable. And then, suddenly, the feed returned. But now it wasn't the warehouse. It was a security camera feed. Live. From outside, dozens of black vehicles were arriving at the gates, unmarked, headlights off. Men in tactical gear moved quickly, not with panic, but with precision. This wasn't a protest. It was a raid. The warehouse fell into a cold, tense silence. Someone whispered, "They're coming for us." Keanu stood up. "Then we finish what we started." He turned back to the camera, knowing it might be the last thing he ever said to the world. "They're trying to silence this because it's working. Not because we're wrong, because we're right. But no matter what happens here tonight, you, watching this, sharing this, feeling this, are the proof that Pulse is bigger than us. You are the network now. You are the signal. Don't stop. Don't give up. Don't let them bury the truth." The screen shook slightly. The team started encrypting files, sending backups to cloud servers, pushing mirrored sites live around the world. Pulse wasn't just a system anymore, it had become an idea. And ideas, when they find the hearts of the willing, can't be destroyed. Priory's voice cracked through the intercom. "They've breached the fence." Keanu and Elon looked at each other for what felt like a lifetime. Not fear, not regret, just quiet knowing. They had done what they set out to do. They had told the truth. And that truth was already in the hands of millions. The lights in the warehouse began to flicker. The doors shook. Shouting outside grew louder, and then, without warning, the front wall exploded inward. Smoke. Lights. Chaos. But even as the signal cut, even as the stream ended, something incredible had already begun. Across the world, people began to organize. Doctors in Lebanon reopened clinics. Teachers in Argentina connected schools to Pulse's open data. Hackers in Estonia created mirrors of the system. And in cities across America, thousands gathered in silence, holding signs that read one word: human. Because no matter what came next, one thing was now certain. They could shut down the building, but they couldn't shut down the movement. The cost of truth, the smoke hung in the air like a curtain between the past and what came after. Hours had passed since the raid. The warehouse, once alive with signals and hope, now lay in pieces. Shattered glass underfoot, walls broken, cables ripped from their sockets like torn veins. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was hollow, heavy, but it wasn't the silence of failure. It was the silence that comes just before a storm breaks across history. Because while the structure was gone, the message had already burned its way into the world. Keanu Reeves sat alone in an interrogation room lit by a single flickering bulb. He had not been charged, not officially. No words had been spoken since he was brought in. Not by the officers, not by the man who sat across from him, face blank, suit perfect, voice unreadable. He was someone powerful, but he didn't give a name. Keanu didn't ask for one. He didn't need to. He already understood what was happening. They weren't looking to prosecute. They were looking to erase, to contain the ripple before it became a wave. The man across the table finally spoke, slowly and coldly, each word measured like a scalpel. You had a choice. We gave you silence. You chose fire. Keanu didn't flinch. No, I chose light. The man didn't blink. You're not a politician, not a scientist, not an elected leader. What gave you the right to speak for the world? Keanu leaned forward. No one gave me the right. I just refused to wait for permission. Outside the room, chaos brewed. Protests erupted in dozens of cities. Students walked out of classrooms. Journalists risked their careers to leak internal memos. Whistleblowers came forward, and all of them said the same thing. We saw the live stream. We saw the truth. Pulse hadn't just inspired people. It had revealed a gap in the soul of society, a hunger no technology alone could fill. And suddenly, silence was no longer enough. Meanwhile, Elon Musk remained unaccounted for. After the raid, he vanished, no phone, no signal, no trace. Some said he fled, others said he was taken. Rumors spread like wildfire. Private jets, underground bunkers, hidden servers. But Keanu knew better. Elon hadn't run. He had disappeared for a reason. And deep down, Keanu feared what that reason might be. Days passed in a blur. The team had scattered. Some were in hiding. Others were giving interviews. The world was split. Some praised Pulse as the beginning of a new human era. Others condemned it as a reckless rebellion. Governments clamped down on open satellite usage. Corporations filed lawsuits. But everywhere, people kept sharing the last words of the livestream. You are the signal. The phrase appeared on walls, on signs, on shirts. It became more than a quote. It became a code. Then, just when hope seemed thin, a package arrived at Keanu's holding facility. No return address. Inside was a single hard drive and a handwritten note in Elon's sharp, precise handwriting. It read, "They took everything but not this. Finish it." The guards didn't know what to make of it. They ran checks, no viruses, no malware, no traceable tech. They handed it over with suspicion. Keanu took it with reverence. The drive contained the full backup of Pulse. Every node, every line of code, every map and contact. It wasn't just a copy. It was the seed of a rebirth, and attached to it was a single video file. Keanu plugged it in. The screen lit up. Elon appeared unshaven in a dim room that looked like the basement of an old shelter. His eyes were tired. His voice was rough, but his conviction burned brighter than ever. If you're watching this, I'm gone. Maybe not. Forever. Maybe just off the grid. Maybe they'll make sure you never hear from me again. But if they do, let them know I wasn't afraid. Not of them. Not of what they'd take. But of what would happen if we did nothing. Pulse wasn't just code, it was connection. We built it to remind people that empathy can be engineered, compassion can be activated, and that humanity isn't outdated, it's undefeated. His last words were soft. Don't let this die. Keanu sat in silence, the glow of the screen, painting his face in pale light. He knew what he had to do. And it wouldn't be legal. It wouldn't be safe, but it would be right. 1 week later, on the anniversary of the first Pulse test in Uganda, a new signal went live. Not from the warehouse, not from a studio, but from thousands of homes, phones, laptops. The source was no longer central. It was everywhere. The Pulse network had been reborn, decentralized, encrypted, impossible to shut down. Anyone, anywhere, could now join it. Report a crisis, respond to one, see need and meet it, not because of money, not because of orders, but because they chose to. And this time the world didn't wait. Aid trucks moved without waiting for government approval. People crowdfunded supplies in hours. Doctors in rural India operated by candlelight using data relayed from Brazil. Water, filtration systems reached island villages. Medicine found its way through smugglers turned heroes. And through it all, Keanu Reeves stayed out of sight. He wasn't doing interviews. He wasn't making speeches. He was walking the streets, visiting shelters, hugging children who didn't know who he was but felt something in his presence. Something soft, something safe. Months later, a journalist finally tracked him down in a small village on the border of Thailand, where he was helping repair solar panels for a school built out of scrap wood and compassion. She asked him if he had any regrets. He looked up, smiled gently, and said, "Only that we didn't start sooner." "What happened to Elon?" she asked. Keanu paused. The wind moved through the trees, and then slowly, he pointed to the sky. "He's still up there, in every signal, every heartbeat we answer." And as the camera panned out, the world saw what had truly been created. Not a platform, not a project, but a living, breathing network of people choosing to care. No one could shut that down, because you can't silence a heartbeat, not when it becomes the rhythm of the world.